But living here in the United States, not only is it a blessing, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. We have so many distractions. We live such a good life that it's easy to get distracted from what the Lord has in store for us, what His true will for us. It's there's so much shiny stuff going by that catches our eye. It makes me think of, you got the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, and who are you going to listen to? And remember, the devil, he doesn't just put some ugly plan out there that it's real obvious that it's a bad deal. He puts something out there that's pretty close to the real thing, but just not quite it.
Angel of light.
Yeah, and tries to talk you into that. And that's what he does to people that have been saved, the believers. He tries to get them so they're not effective as a Christian, so they don't encourage anybody else to go along that road. And the unbeliever, he tells them, well, you can't ever be a believer because it's just too hard. You're not ever good enough. When you're never going to be good enough, all you got to do is accept what is freely given to you, and through that, you will get better. But so watch out for the devil. How do you know when it's God speaking and when it's the devil speaking? How do you discern the difference? And what came to mind to me is everybody's watched a bank teller count money. When they're counting to themselves, they're counting it really quick. And if anything's wrong, they know it in a heartbeat. And how do they know that? A counterfeit piece comes up or something like that, and they know it. How do they know that? Because they spend so much time with the real thing that the counterfeit is very obvious to them. This summer, when I had extra time, or most of my focus when I was able to read the Word, and which I do pretty much every day, but I was trying to learn about King David. And King David was called a man after God's own heart. And King David, we all know a lot about the story. Everybody knows a little bit about King David. His life wasn't a fairy tale. His life was full of, a lot of good things, but there was also murder, deceit, infidelity, all kinds of crazy stuff going on all through David's life. And David is, they did 60-some chapters. The Bible has 60-some chapters talking about David, second only to Jesus. So David is a pretty prominent character in the Bible, and he was titled a man after God's own heart. If we were standing there looking at David and we knew the facts or we knew the story without knowing that he was a man after God's own heart, would have we did that? Would have we said that? God looks at things differently than we do, differently than man does. God looks at the inside. Man looks at the outside. We need to try and look at the inside a little better. So anyway, a little bit about David. He was anointed king of Israel. The Israelites, they wanted a king, and so the Israelites, they picked Saul. They wanted him to be their king. And God said, well, you don't really want a king, but okay, if you want here, there's your king. You wanted him. That didn't work out so good. Even though Saul was anointed by God, it didn't work out. While Saul was following God, he did okay, but then he went away from God, and it went south quick from there. Anyway, David comes along, or God says, well, I'm going to anoint you a king. I'm going to pick the king and have Samuel the prophet, anoint him. So God tells Samuel to go to Bethlehem, to Jesse, and anoint one of Jesse's sons as King David. Well, Jesse's got 8 sons, and he brings up 7 of them. And Samuel, the prophet Samuel, immediately says, well, that guy looks like a good king. That guy looks like a good king. And went down the line, and God said, no, he's not going to work. He's not going to work. All 7 of them, and Samuel says, don't you have another son? None of these are the one. And Jesse says, well, yeah, but he's like the redheaded stepchild. He's out taking care of the sheep and stuff. And that's, he was a shepherd. That's not a real glorious job. In the Bible, that was pretty much lower rung. He's the only one. He's the youngest. He's kind of a runt. You don't want him, do you? Well, yeah, I want him. Bring him in, where nobody sits down until he gets here. And sure enough, he comes in, and God says, that's the one. So Samuel anoints him, pours oil over his head, and whispers in his ear, you're anointed to be the next king of Israel, David the shepherd boy. And it says, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. And David went back out to the sheep. You don't hear much from David until David and Goliath. Well, Goliath was a pretty scary guy. David's dad sent him to take food to his brothers who were in Saul's army, and they were fighting the Philistines. And every day Goliath goes out in front of the Israelite army and taunts them and says, come fight me, you chickens. And of course, Goliath was a pretty scary guy. He was seriously over 9 foot tall. His armor weighed over 100 pounds. His spear was a little over 20 feet long, and the head on it weighed 15 pounds. This guy would have been pretty scary. I can't imagine even picking up. Most of us probably couldn't pick up that spear. But anyway, so the Israelites didn't want to go out and fight him. David shows up there about the time that Goliath goes out on the battlefield and starts taunting him. And David says, how dare this guy taunt the army of the living God? Who does he think he is? And David says, I'll fight him. And he's a shepherd boy, a young boy. And of course, David's brothers said, you aren't going to fight him. He'll kill you. So yeah, I want to go fight him. So he goes to King Saul and says the same thing. I want to go fight him. King Saul said, no, you're a shepherd boy. You can't do that. David had not an ounce of doubt in his mind that he could go fight Goliath. Here's what he says to Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 17. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and attacked him. I rescued it from his mouth, and when he rose up against me, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. So David was not concerned about it whatsoever. He knew he had a clear vision of what he needed to do. And there was not a single ounce of doubt in his mind. By the way, that shepherd gig, fighting lions and bears, it must have been a pretty good deal, a training ground for God. I think last month we talked about Moses, and where was he when he got the call from God? He was also being a shepherd. Many times throughout the Bible, you see shepherds, which are kind of the lower rung in the societal order, being raised up and used by the Lord. He uses the weak incredibly. He never picks anybody for their personal strengths, I guarantee you. Anyway, so David was anointed to be king. He killed Goliath. Well, okay, he hadn't got that for you, hadn't I? They put all the armor on David, Saul does, and David gets up and he can't walk. He says, I can't go fight in this. I'm a shepherd. So he takes all the armor off and says, I'm going to go get me 3 round stones. And he goes out to fight Goliath, the Philistine, and Goliath sees him, this shepherd boy, he's compared to Goliath, he's probably pretty much a runt, and laughs at him and taunts him. And who are you? You going to hurt me? And David said, yeah, just wait. He picks up a stone and pops him in the head. Goliath falls over. David goes over and takes his sword from him and kills him with his own sword. David, the shepherd boy. The Philistine army sees this, and they turn tail and they run. They head for the hills. The Israelite army is fast behind them, and they rout them pretty good. So Saul, of course, he wants to know who this young man is. Who is this young man, the shepherd boy that killed Goliath? So he brings him in front of Saul, and of course Saul keeps him with him. He starts out as being Saul's armor bearer, and then he goes on to lead a good portion of Saul's army. And wherever David went, he had huge success compared to the other generals of Saul's army. It was a marked difference between what David did and all the other generals did. And David was returning from a conquest, and he comes in through town, and the women of the town are singing, Saul killed his thousands, and David killed his 10,000s, and this made Saul mad. And Saul was starting to get a little crazy. The Lord sent a bad spirit on him that made him crazy. And that was another, he liked David to come in and play the harp, and the bad spirit would kind of lead him and calm him a little bit. But Saul just went plain old nuts. And it went downhill from there, and he spent the rest of his life trying to kill David. And David spent the rest of his life the rest of Saul's life running for his own life, just hiding out wherever he could, living off the land, hiding in caves. He went and lived with the Philistines for a while and was part of their army. But twice, David had the opportunity to kill Saul. One time he cut off a piece of his robe. Another time he took his jug of water and his spear while he was sleeping. And both times he went away from Saul and, hey, Saul, I was within this far of you and I didn't kill you. And Saul's, why are you trying to kill me? And Saul, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be doing that. I won't do it anymore. But both times David's men were telling him, kill him now. Get it over with. Get it done. And David's, no, who am I to kill a man anointed by God to be the king of Israel? It's not my position to do that. David had a firm belief and an absolute direction that he knew God wanted to take him. He left room for God's vengeance also. It wasn't for him to do this, and he knew this. He was in tune with what the Lord wanted for him. Anyway, and after Saul died, Saul and his oldest son Jonathan died in a battle. They both died in the same battle. And Saul's general appointed Saul's eldest living son, Jehoshaphat, thank you, as king of Israel. But he was king of the 11 tribes, and David was anointed by the tribe of Judah, and David was king over Judah. And he served king over Judah for 7 years, and Jehoshaphat was king over the other 11 tribes for 7 years. And civil war, Jehoshaphat ended up being killed. And the people of the other 11 tribes went to David and said, hey, the Lord is always with you. Everywhere you go, there's huge success. We want you to be king over all the tribes of Israel. So David was king over the united tribes, all 12 tribes of Israel in the city of David. Thank you, Jerusalem. Can't believe I forgot that one. The city of Jerusalem. He's king over the all 12 tribes united. And now David had a little bit of peace in his life. He wasn't running for his life, expecting to get a spear rammed through him anytime, anywhere. He had time to actually, relax and probably govern the people a little bit. But this is where stuff started to go a little bit south for David. He lost his focus. Something shiny went by, and he kind of lost his focus on what the truth was and where he really should be. Through this is where Bathsheba, he sinned, one of his best friend's wives, committed adultery. Then he sent his best friend Uriah into battle and put him in a position that he would not make it out of. He murdered one of his best friends so he could take his wife. This is a man after God's own heart. Does it make sense? Later on, one of David's sons, I'm losing track of all their names. Absalom, thank you. You're good at that. One of David's sons, Absalom, killed his half-brother, Ammon. And for a darn good reason he killed him. As far as I'm concerned, Ammon took his half-sister, Absalom, and forcibly made her lay with him. And then kicked her out in the street. I think he was pretty justified in doing that. But anyway, he killed one of David's sons, so now David's after Absalom. And Absalom, through deceit, gets back in David's good graces. And as soon as he's back in David's good graces, he starts stealing the hearts of the people of Israel. And he got the 11 tribes again to declare him king over Israel. So Absalom is now king, and David's out. And if you know anything, in those times, if you're overthrown as a king, there's a really good chance you and anybody that can inherit the throne from you is going to die pretty quick after that. So David goes back into hiding. And they find, and it's funny how the bad times you really remember the Lord. And, David had repented and meant it before this, but he was on the run again. And then Absalom, he makes a really bad decision. He decides to ride a mule. And it says in the Bible that Absalom Absalom was riding this mule, and the mule took him under a tree and stuck his head in the tree, and the mule kept going. And Absalom was left hanging between the earth and heaven. Well, David's warriors found Absalom, and they killed him. So now Absalom wasn't, and David was back in charge. But it just shows you how many, the bad times and the deceit and stuff like that. And eventually, David lives out his years, and he's king over Israel in Jerusalem. And he dies and goes to rest with his fathers, and Solomon's crowned king. But all of this, lies, deceit, infidelity, murder, why was David called a man of God? Man after God's own heart. I think a lot of it can be summed up, or a good example of it anyway, is in one verse. It's from 2 Samuel 7:18. It says, "Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and prayed, 'Who am I, O sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you have brought me this far?'" Now this is David right after the prophet Nathan had anointed him, saying, "Your house will be established over Israel forever." And David said, "Who am I, O Lord? What have I done to ever deserve this honor, that my house will be established forever?" He was humble, always humbled before the Lord. And you can see this. There's many prayers of David going, the Psalms and stuff. You always hear David praying. And he was always very humble before the Lord. The first sentence is that King David went in and sat before the Lord. He had spent a lot of time, quiet, solitude, sitting before the Lord, getting to know the Lord. That training grounds out there being a shepherd, I think he had a lot of time to sit and think about what the Lord had in store for him. And he knew the Lord. And he prayed. He prayed earnestly. The power of prayer is incredible. And believing in the Lord through his prayer, he was blessed with an unshakable faith. And I believe we have, last week I heard a interesting, or kind of a neat definition of faith. Your faith is defined by, and this isn't exactly what it says, by what degree you expect an answer. So, how much faith do you really have? So what can we take away from David's life? He was a man after God's own heart. How can we be like David? What can we do to be like David? Pray, first of all. Spend time with the Lord in solitude, seeking the Lord, opening your heart to what the Lord has for you. In prayer and meditation, the Holy Bible, the whole complete, timeless Word of God is available to any of us. And I know a lot of people have a hard time reading that, but don't stress about doing it. Open it up. Ask God, open my heart to what you have for me. Read a little bit and close it out and say, thank you, God. Tell me what and you may not have a lightning bolt moment that he tells you something, but just keep doing it and stuff will start clicking on you. And it's really cool when the Bible comes alive. Keep trying and it will happen. So us, like the bank teller, spend so much time with the real thing. If we spend so much time with the real thing, with the King of Kings, the Lord of all, looking at his word in prayer and meditation, looking at him, we'll spend so much time with the real thing that the counterfeit will know it immediately. We'll know what the Lord's will is by spending time with him. We've got to make sure we recognize God's hand in our life, and let's take that forward and make sure everybody else can see God's hand working in our life. But we've got to recognize what he's doing before we can portray it to other people. Thank you guys so much. The band's going to come up for a couple, and thank you guys. Then we'll close in prayer.